Hey, so good to be here. I'm Daniel Bernard Remain, Dartmouth Roth Distinguished Visiting Scholar. And this is Hop at Home, and this is Who You Are with DBR. I'll be your host, DBR, Daniel Bernard Remain. So good to be here with you. So let's get started. We have a very special guest tonight. But before I introduce our very esteemed guest, who is, I feel, an international treasure, an icon, and GOAT, that's greatest of all time, for those who don't know, just wanted to take a few moments and reflect on where you are, where I am, what's the feeling. I'm on the East Coast, so we just went through a tropical storm and hurricane. The winds were severe. And for the lives lost in that storm, and for those of you suffering, we send out positive energy to you. And I'm also, like a lot of you out there, I'm raising a son, co-parenting with his mother. And always a special shout out to Zachary, who is, like a lot of young people in this country, getting ready to go back to their education, although we're not quite sure what that space is going to be. As I like to say, this is a space of captivity and creation. And, I'm so thankful for the guests on our past show, Black Violin and Rachel Barton Pine. But tonight, we have a very special guest in Jawole Zollar, and dancer, creator, choreographer, inventor, social entrepreneur, university professor, and my friend. Let's welcome Jawole to the show.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm great. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. Really, just really honored to have you here, actually. And I've known your work for years. I've known you personally for a few years now, and we have a lot of friends in common. It's great. And just thank you for being here. I really, truly appreciate it, and our audience really, truly appreciates it too. Yeah,
It's an honor.
awesome. So can I tell just the people a little bit about you? Is that okay? I know that's always
Yeah.
like what, but I
It's
just
okay.
want them to know. Yes. So this is what, and correct me at any time, but I have that you were born in Kansas City, Missouri. Is that how you say it?
hmm
I say it cool like that. And that one of your first teachers was Joseph Stevenson. Is that right? Who studied with Catherine Dunham.
Yes.
Yep. And your early training was in Afro-Cuban dance and other dance techniques that helped to form a part of your teaching aesthetic.
Mhm.
Is that right? Okay. And you have a Bachelor of Arts in Dance from the University of Missouri at Kansas City and a Master of Fine Arts from Florida State University, where you are a tenured professor of dance. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, that's it.
Oh, awesome. And in fact, that title is the Nancy Smith Fichter Professor of Dance.
Victor. Yeah.
Fichter, Professor of Dance, and Robert O. Lawton Distinguished Professor at Florida State University. Awesome.
Yes.
So important. I want to talk a little bit about what that means in terms of your creative practice. In 1984, you founded Urban Bushwoman as a performance ensemble dedicated to exploring the use of cultural expression as a catalyst for social change.
Yeah.
Featured in the PBS documentary Free to Dance, which chronicles the African American influence on modern dance, Jawole was designated a Master of Choreography by the John F. Kennedy Performing Arts Center in 2005. You are a former board member of Dance USA. In 2008, you became a United States Artist Win Fellowship, and in 2009, a fellowship from the Guggenheim. A memorial was bestowed upon you. You're still dancing, you're still touring, and you received a Doris Duke Performing Artist Award in 2015, a Dance USA Honor Award in 2016, and in 2017, a Lifetime Bessies Achievement Award. Yes. So
Yeah.
we got to tell the story. We got to tell the story. So thank you so much for being here. And it's I just wanted to talk about what I call it's a dual crisis, probably a triple crisis, but this dual crisis of a global pandemic, fight, a loving war, a pointed struggle for social justice. And I just had some questions. My first question, Jawole, was how are you coping with this dual crisis? And what has
You know,
changed? What's changed for you? And what won't change for you?
well, I think like many people, the best way that I describe it is that I'm week by week, day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute. And those shifts in my internal state that are reflected externally
Mm,
are just part of, how what it means to live in a time of constant change and something that is not that I have not faced before,
mm,
like many people. What I'm using are my artist tools, which creating into the unknown, imagining into the unknown,
mm.
as a way to anchor myself.
I love
And I
that.
forget the second part of that was.
Oh, the second part of that question was, what has changed for you and
Mm.
what won't change for you? Yeah,
Well, I think what has changed for me is travel.
sure.
That I'm in one place.
Mm.
I'm right now in Garrison, New York, but I've been spending most of the time in Fort Greene, New York.
Is
Um,
that where
and
you
this
live?
is the yeah,
Yeah, okay.
this is the time I would be in Florida.
Ah,
So travel has definitely changed for me. What won't change is my investment in um, being an artist who's concerned about how we as human beings walk through this world with equity and
mm,
how we create spaces and places where where we can feel the full equity of each individual and the equitable situations of each institution and each individual.
absolutely, absolutely. You just used this term, the creative unknown.
Mm.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? I think that's such an important term.
When I go into the studio, when I'm thinking about a new work, I have a hunch, but a lot of it I really don't know. And that's where it's the trusting of the unfolding so that the things that I can't see, the things that are not tangible, the things that are not visible, I'm trusting that I will move through them through my art, through my practice with great clarity, even though the world doesn't have clarity.
Yeah.
My practice has clarity, but it's also inside of a space that's unknown. So both of those things live together in a really dynamic way.
Oh, live together in a really dynamic way. Well, we have a lot of people online and a lot of our friends, Jawole, Colleen Jennings Rogensack.
Ah,
Yes, from
hi,
ASU
Colin.
Gamage, forks up, mask up. I get it. I'm a proud institute professor and professor of practice at Arizona State University, and of course, Colleen Jennings Rogensack, who's the executive
Yeah,
director of ASU Gamage, and our dear friend is on the line. And
yes.
she asked three questions, which I've actually kind of lived with in a lot of ways. So when you
Mm,
meet Colleen and she wants to work with you, she'll say something. I'm paraphrasing. Um, what can you do? What can I do? What can we do together?
mm,
And I think that's very much connected actually to this question that I have for you was, where was your creative practice born and
mm.
how much of it resides in urban bush woman?
Well, I would have to say my creative practice was born in where I was born and raised in Kansas City, Missouri. I
Mm,
grew up in the 50s during segregation. So I grew
mm.
up in an all Black community. All of the institutions were Black. My first contact with white folks was in college. So I
Wow,
grew up in a
really?
dense experience of Black culture. And
Mm,
that for me what was real. And I grew up in a culture of jazz and Kansas City and its rhythms and blues. And
mm,
so that's my creative DNA. That's what I was born of. My mother was a jazz singer and pianist. My father was in real estate. And there was always a creative space around how Black people make work for themselves, not thinking about a white gaze, but how do we create for ourselves and with our community.
Ooh, I'm in your class right now, Professor Zollar. I'm in your class right now. You said a couple things that I thought I just wanted to get a little more feedback on. You talked about a dense experience of Black culture. What
Mhm.
is that exactly? A dense experience.
Well, when people often use the term the inner city, um, that is the space I grew up in. So the density of it was all Black. So everything from the way that we marched, from the
Right.
way that we were, in the drill teams, the way that we played, we didn't think about it being Black. It
Mm,
just was.
just what?
Um, it was the traditions that we grew up in. And it was actually when I went to college and I started to understand that, oh, this isn't the norm for everyone. These were my experiences, but this wasn't the norm. So it began a negotiating of how do I interact with the white world? How do I communicate about my work, my art, where it comes from? And I remember that one of the things that I started to really, a word that I started to use or words is rough hewn, because
Mm,
within the community that I grew up in, it was not interested in, polishing off the edges. It was interested in that you see that truth of the edges,
ooh,
you see that authenticity of the edges. And I think when I encountered, white culture and white creative space, there was both an interest, like, oh, I don't know this. Let me try to get inside of this. And at the same time, constantly trying to or working to validate, like, okay, you're not just going to erase me because maybe you don't understand it.
right.
Because it's rough hewn doesn't mean it doesn't have rigor and intellectual prowess and research, deep
Yes.
research.
Yes. Well, we're opening this up. We have questions and comments coming in. Please send your questions and comments in. This is a conversation not only between myself and Jawole, but this is a conversation with the world, with all of you. And we have our first question from Colleen. Colleen's question is, what is the impact of Black Lives Matters on artists? What do you feel the impact is, Jawole?
Well, it's a complex question. Black Lives Matter is a deliberate political construct to face the oppression that has been part of Black people's experience for 400 years.
That's right.
And something I was talking about today is that somewhere around George Floyd's death, I had this flashback and I remembered that the first guy, my first boyfriend, my first guy I
Mm.
kissed,
Mm.
um, was shot and killed by the police. He was shot in the back by the police while he was running and he was trying to get over a fence.
Mm.
And
Mm.
all of those things
Right.
we buried. And I remember going to the school the next day and it was talked about, but the talk was like, make sure you do this. It was
Right.
nothing about that the behavior, being shot in the back,
Mm.
unarmed.
Mm.
There was no discussion of that. The discussion was like, make sure, like, if the police stop you, it was all about our behavior. And I internalized that.
That's right.
And so I think what's powerful about the Black Lives Matter movement is that we have video footage,
That's right.
that we have a history. We can talk about this history of oppression, 400 years plus,
That's
but you
right.
can also, in the most excruciating way,
Mm.
see that no, we've been telling a truth for many, many years,
That's
which
right.
many people thought was an anomaly.
That's
Oh,
right.
that's a bad apple, here and there. Um,
Yeah.
and this is systemic.
This is systemic.
And I hadn't it was in the George Floyd murder that I remembered Bernard was his
Right.
name, and
Mm,
just how I buried that because it started to become normalized of
yes.
your life growing up and living in what people call the inner city.
That's right. That's right. Well, I have struggled with this notion of how could I get to an efficient, expedient definition of Black Lives Matter? Mine would be it's a moment, it's a movement, and a mission.
Hmm.
And that you have to understand these component parts. It's a moment that predates, just so we're clear, the lynching and murder of George Floyd. It is a movement now that is maybe the most significant movement of this century. We will see, but it's certainly global. And there's a mission. The mission is clear. It just says, how do we create systemic anti-racism? Right? How do we create systems of anti-racism and a new ecology for the arts? I think it's important that we see your work. We've been
Mm.
talking a lot, but there's time. Let's take the time, right? What do you think?
Can I say one thing before
Oh,
you
always.
before you do? I'm so glad you said that
Yeah.
because what Black Lives Matter is not a project. It's
Mm-mm.
not an artistic project. Okay, I'm doing this project
Hmm.
to express something. The fact that you said it is a movement and it is part of our mission, it's a movement that is connected historically to movements. It is not an art project.
That is exactly right. It is a movement, and then you're right. It's a movement connected to
Mm.
a moment that is a part of this country's history. This country was founded in inequity, right?
Yeah,
This country was founded and actually upholds this
yeah,
perverse sense of white supremacy, and the mission of Black Lives Matters is to dismantle and disrupt, and I would say destroy
yeah.
white supremacy. Right. So let's be real clear about that. The lines are clear, and I'll even go further. Well, let me just stay. Let me not. Oh, I'm going to go there. Let me not go there just yet, because where I want to stay is with your work and the beautiful work of
Okay,
urban bush woman, which is so
okay.
important. Can you tell us a little bit about it, what we're about to see, the excerpt from your latest?
Yeah, this is an excerpt from a work called Walking with Train. And from the first time I heard Coltrane, I knew that I wanted to choreograph to him, but I was like, he's a master. I have to wait till I have some mastery. And so I wanted to do a work that also embodied the dancers as a band, as what we called the band state of playing the dance, of playing our instruments. And I wanted to work with a solo pianist who was George Caldwell, and he brought in Lafayette Harris to reinterpret the music. I didn't want to work with saxophone. I wanted to work with a different a different way of the virtuosity in the life and legacy of John Coltrane.
Ooh. Well, let's the title of the work again that we're about to see excerpt is
Walking with Train.
Walking with Train. Let's watch for a few minutes.
The Coltrane is an icon. His work is masterful, and he changed the way that people thought about this form we call jazz. It's music that moved me very early in my choreographic dancing life when I was just thinking about being a choreographer. So I became interested not only in Coltrane's music, but the journey of his life. Right now, Walking with Train is conceived in three parts, looking at three different kind of manifestations of Coltrane's life. One section is taking the last section of a Love Supreme psalm and working with the process I call physical transcription and working to get the exact phrasing, but it would be in silence. Another section, I'm really looking at how people talked about experiencing his music in the club, that it was muscular, that it was athletic. People had this experience of of something intense and powerful and deep. So I just have questions about, like, how do we find that? What is a world that we can create that doesn't try to replicate that, but takes a riff off of that? My original idea for making a new approach to A Love Supreme was to do new music and original music inspired by, but I thought I didn't want to use a saxophone because I thought the reference was too obvious. So I thought, well, what if a pianist took an approach that took each of those sections and the ideas of those sections, but really took a very unique and purposeful musical approach.
Well, George called me up and I said, well, you know, they do know that John played the saxophone, right? So we had a nice little laugh about that. Then I said, okay, well, fine. You know, I was really excited about trying to bring that genius of John Coltrane music to the piano. You know?
I think there's something different that happens when you're working with live music as opposed to recorded music. There's an immediacy, there's a response. You know, you have to be deeply attuned to listening, and particularly when you're working with an improvisational form, the creative music that we commonly call jazz. This idea of co-creating on the stage together is a very exciting concept. One of the questions I was interested in is, how do we have a deep relationship with the music of Coltrane and the life of Coltrane as a jumping off point to new information and new material? And that's been a lot of process and research for it.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that cut. That's okay, but that's fantastic work. Looks like a fantastic work.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. The work was co-choreographed with Samantha Speece. And we really went on a journey of research and discovery around John Coltrane. My work is research heavy, so we create from deep research, and it was exciting to delve into this.
Oh, well, along those lines, you are a tenured professor of dance at Florida State University. They're very lucky to have you. And I had a question about that. What's the role of the dancer, the choreo, and I'm sorry, as an educator, what are the challenges of how we educate one another as we consider public health, curriculum evolution, and spaces for learning, sharing, and equity? Yeah.
You know, it's a great question. It's a lot of universities are grappling with this in new ways.
Yes.
And I think the thing that I'm becoming most aware of right now is, how do you create a space of rigor and agency? And at the same time, that so much of learning, particularly in the university, is about self-study. The university will not provide all of the answers. So how do we create the curriculum and the container that students understand the part that what they're interested in, that they have to do rigorous study? It may be in the curriculum, maybe it's not. But how does it tie to the curriculum, and how do we provide the ways that they understand that you got to go in and you got to do your work as a student? You're not just an empty vessel, and you're not just there to receive. You have a charge. Like, I used to joke that I could have probably gotten 2 degrees when I was in college, one in African American literature, because I think I read every book that was written by Black writers, and then the other would have been in jazz studies, because I was listening so intently. That wasn't in my curriculum. That was my interest. That was my study. And what I looked for is what I was learning from this institution, that it was a predominantly white institution. It wasn't meant to serve me. What could I learn from it? And then how could I take the things that I needed that would be useful from that, and then apply them to the self-study that I was deeply involved in, because college taught me how to do that research, how to do that self-study that I didn't know before.
Well, this leads me to one of my last questions, actually, Jawole. What terrifies you the most and fills you with hope the most?
I think what terrifies me, I love this question, by the way.
Oh,
I think what terrifies me is that moment as a choreographer
mm,
when you walk into the studio with a group of people for the first time
mm,
and you know you don't have the answers. And
mm,
you know that it will be a process together of
yeah,
discovery.
mm,
And that there's that vibrating part of yourself that is like, "Ah, I don't know, can I live up to this? Can I reach this? Can I meet this? And am I okay if I don't?" Because
mm,
not every project you do. Do I give myself permission that if I can't quite meet or reach it, that I create a way that I'm okay. So that
mm.
that terror is something that is both exciting and it fuels me and it's necessary. And then what was the second part of it?
What feel
The
yeah, what and
oh,
what terrifies you and what fills you with hope the most?
I'm a person that tends to be fairly optimistic, and I tend to find, like in everything, okay, what's the lesson here? What am I learning? I have to say, just recently, when I heard Reverend Lawson's 91-year-old Reverend Lawson's speech at John Lewis's funeral,
Oh, yeah. Amen.
I got fired up.
Amen.
I got excited.
Mhm,
I got like
mhm.
energized in a whole nother way.
Yes.
And so when I see young people out there discovering activism and not backing down, and then
Yeah.
I see the wisdom of someone like Reverend Lawson, those things fill me with hope.
Oh, amen. I agree. I
Mm.
agree. Well, thinking about the future, our good friend Mary Lou Oleski is on the line, and she has a question for you, Jawole.
Jawole, that's right. Yes.
Jawole. With
Mm.
35 years of urban bushwoman, what hopes do you have now for its future?
That we stay on the edge, that we
Mm,
create, that
mhm,
we don't become complacent.
mm,
My hopes are around continuing to push. And I think sometimes it's a challenging space sometimes to be in a place of innovation. I remember
oh, yes.
early on, and even sometimes still today, people would ask, "Do your dancers have any training?" And my cynical self would want to say, "Oh no, we just woke up one day and we started magically all doing the same steps together." But
Mm,
what I realized they were seeing was the deliberate way that, like an actor, when you see an actor, you know that they've rehearsed their lines, that they were directed, that there's craft, but they make you feel like it is all happening right in that moment,
mm,
right from the top of your head. And so that thing that has been a part of urban bushwomen that I think many people have misunderstood
mm,
because we made it to look like it was just happening in that moment. And so I think the way that people diminished Black women's voices and Black folks was to assume, oh, it's intuitive, it's just all, it doesn't have that kind of rigor.
mhm,
So my hope is for urban bushwomen that we keep pushing, and if people aren't there with us, they don't get it, they don't understand, that's okay. That we keep pushing and that we keep pushing through an anti-racist framework, which
mm,
has been
mhm.
developed over the years with our partner People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, that
Right.
constantly has us examining who we are, how we're creating, what we're creating, that we will keep pushing that um, in ways that I have no way to know about.
Oh, that's so there's certain things here that I'm taking a log, a list of. We have a couple more questions, but some of the things that you were talking about today centered on do I give myself permission? And I'm thinking about how much I don't give myself permission. Do I give myself permission to be creative now? Do I give myself permission to not be creative now? Do I give
Mm,
myself permission to reflect and meditate and
yeah.
push back? And one of the questions we have in the room from Kelly Keely. Sorry, Keely is. Are you and your dancers creating new work during this time?
Absolutely. Urban Bushwoman has two, Sam Spiess,
Hmm.
Samantha Spiess, and Shannon Judson. They are the two co-artistic directors at this time, and I'm founding artistic director. And they're creating amazing new work. Right now, they're working with an artist journal in the virtual form, but it's to lead to what we know will be our return to the stage and live performance. I'm constantly looking at and creating new work, and at the same time understanding the repertory that has been created over 35 years and the value of bringing it forward. So, yeah, we have to be in the new, and we're also in the history of what was.
Oh, the history of.
What was.
Ooh,
And what was is now what is.
that's right. What was is now what is. Do you understand? Gotta get an amen. Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the traditions of what is about a small part of this show, Jawole, is that I play a little violin, and I there's so many things and I could play and do, and I don't often do this, but if it's okay, I would I have a tradition. My own tradition. They're musical portraits. And it's my way of musically looking at you, thinking about and reflecting on what you said and what you're doing and have done. And just a simple way, really, a gesture, a gift to just honor you. So if it's okay, I would love to create a musical portrait of you. Is that okay?
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yes. Yes. That's what I heard tonight. That's what I heard tonight.
Wow. Wow. I heard something very ancient, connected to the land, connected to the source, connected to the birth of our struggles as African American people.
Yes.
and I heard hope and resistance and power.
Mm.
And at
Yes.
times uphill, but then like there was this like kind of insistence that was so beautiful about
Mm.
understanding our power.
Well, thank you so much, Jawole Zollar. I want to end with just a few words from, if it's okay, just based on what you said. I think it's connecting to what we might call a reading from the last words of John Lewis.
Mm,
Just the last few words where he says, while my time here has now come to an end, I want you to know that in the last days and hours of my life, you inspired me. You filled me with hope about the next chapter of the great American story when you used your power to make a difference in our society. People on every continent have stood up in your shoes through decades and centuries before you. The truth does not change. And that is why the answers worked out long ago can help you find solutions to the challenges of our time. Though I
mm,
may not be here with you, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. Now it is your turn to let freedom ring. When
mm,
historians pick up their pens to write the story of the 21st century, let them say that it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide. And
mm.
Jawole Zola, you are our guide. You are our national and international treasure. I can't say it enough. You are an icon. You are the greatest of all time. And you have and will ever be part of the great learning and lessons of this country and of this culture. You are the antidote to the horrors and ills of this world. And I thank you. And your work has and will continue to make all of the difference. Your work has changed and indeed has saved lives.
Oh, it is my deepest and great honor to be here with you tonight and to hear those words spoken and to hear your music. So I thank you for this invitation to speak
Oh, thank
and
you.
be with you.
So good to be with you. I don't want to go, but they're telling me it's time. So, we're going to live on now in the others of the online universe. And ladies and gentlemen, this has been Who You Are with DBR, but this is all about Jawole Zollar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.